Hashtag GizzyCredit. Hashtag GizzyCredit. Hashtag GizzyCredit.
GizzyCredit. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scammed, cause then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. GizzyCredit. my sound or your sound?
Oh man, I'm so sorry about that. Now you guys hear me. Let me know. Now you guys hear me. Let me know. Got Bernardo Hernandez, Antonio, Will, Antonio Hesse, Condrell, LLX, Nathan Talon, Joanna Martinez, No Cell. Okay, you guys hear me now? You guys hear me now? Let me know. New comments? Yes, now. Okay, okay. My people, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Sorry, we haven't been on in about 3 weeks. Again, I was talking to John right now about this current state of what's happening right now. Of course, some of our customers who follow our podcast kind of have an understanding of how things were going to go, especially with the Rona going on and what we've been saying, what John has been saying. But now, with the uncertainty of what's happening with counting ballots and Georgia this, Arizona going blue or red, we want to give you kind of an understanding of what to expect from either if it's going to be a Biden win or if it's going to be a Trump win. All right. So again, John, shout out to John. He's on the phone right now. And I was just asking John, I apologize, John. I should have checked before the audio, but can you go about saying what you were saying right now about the
Yeah,
polls
I
and
was just
everything?
saying that I don't think, I'll just start from the beginning. I said it would be, it would have been nice this year if we just had a runaway election.
Correct.
But 2020 wasn't going to have that just because it's 2020. So, what I was saying also, though, is the fact that there's probably some positives. I mean, there's a lot of positives that come out of 2020, but more specific, a number of them that have transpired over the course of the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months. But one of them, I think, is the fact that in previous administrations, previous election years, typically speaking, they give you an answer on who the president's going to be that evening of the vote, but they don't ever go
Yes.
down and they project out the vote, so they don't wait to get the final tally because it was based on just an understanding, right? Whoever projected, the American people need that answer as
Yes.
it comes, at that time. The problem is now, obviously, Trump wasn't going to go for that, and as a result of that, now they're counting every single vote. And look, I think that's great. I mean, think about how many like you're not getting any slack in this. I mean, it sucks. We have to wait 2 or 3 days, but
Correct.
the fact of the matter though is that you're getting the right answer. They can count it 15 different times. There's some of these rooms, whether it be Georgia or Philadelphia or whatever, they got layers upon layers upon layers of checks and balances in there. They got 3 people on the floor checking this person, 3 people in the back room where they're counting checking people. They got an eye in the sky looking over all of it. I mean, it's like the Federal Reserve in some of these in these voting booths, which it should, by the way, right? To make sure. I mean, they got representatives from both sides watching it and making sure that it's being done. I just think it's a better and more transparent way of making sure, because politics is, I mean, it's shocking to me that for years that they would just accept it that day and take the projection. Somebody would concede, somebody would accept just based upon the fact. So, I mean, I think this is a positive. I really do. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the mail-in or the other side of it, but I just think it's great that they're going down to every single vote and they're making sure every single vote's cast to eliminate any element of confusion. And I think a lot of it
Correct.
has to probably do with the fact that Trump would have contested it either way. So they're just making sure they're covering their bases, right? Both sides, just because they anticipated the fact that it was going to have to get needled down. But I think for the purposes of, without getting into just an entirely political conversation, I think for the sake of people and their finances, I think, um, the key is based upon um, where we think that this is going to head. And given the fact that whether Biden wins or Trump wins, well, if look, they're speculating that Biden's going to win, right? That's the understanding. And the reason why you see the
Correct.
market run up as it has for the last 3 days was because the understanding going into the election was that it was going to be a blue sweep, right? It was going to be the Democrats were going to take the presidency,
Correct.
the House and the Senate, and at that point they got carte blanche like Trump did when he came in, and they'd be able to pass all these, bills and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the tax increases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the problem is now is that they literally don't have the Senate, so they're not going to get the Senate, so they don't have a blue wave, which effectively means he's a lame duck president, and they're going to have to whoever. I mean, if the House is with the Democrats, the Senate is with the House. I'm sorry, the House, the Democrats have the House, the Republicans have the Senate, and whether it's
Correct.
certain businesses, restaurants, airlines, etc. They desperately need it. They needed it before. They need it more now. So it's going to happen, but it's going to be watered down from where they thought it was going to be. He's not going to get the tax increase on the capital gains that he wanted, meaning Biden, if he wins, from 23 to 46, because there's absolutely no way that's going to get through the Senate. So that's going to be stalwart. So the reality of the situation is going forward, the only real thing that's going to probably end up happening is that you're going to get the stimulus, and then it's going to be a lot of pontificating at that point as far as them trying to figure out ways to start paying this debt back, and how they're going to do that without strangling, the United States, right? Because that's the next plan. It's the only thing that they're going to agree on. They're not going to agree on his, any of these radical measures. There's no way they're going to agree to the new Green Deal or whatever his plan was.
Yes.
There's absolutely no way that's going to happen. So that's why you've seen the market go up. That's why you've seen everybody happy, because effectively that means business as usual, right? That means that's why you saw the FANG stocks go up, meaning Facebook, Apple, etc., across the board, Netflix, Google, etc., because the idea was that if it was going to be a blue wave, meaning all Democrats, they were going to get hammered, right, on regulation.
Yes.
They were going to get hammered. They were going to get regulated. And it's not going to happen now because nothing's going to be able to get pushed through. It's going to be like Obama's first term, right, where nothing got pushed through. And honestly, not much got pushed through with Obama in the second term until Obamacare at the very, very end of his second term. Pushed through. But for the sake of the whole situation, that's why you're seeing the market run up. That's why you're seeing a little optimism on the market side of things. And it is a positive, right? Because everybody went into it. If you looked at the market last week, it sold off like crazy. And it sold off like crazy because people were positioning, because they were anticipating that it was going to be a Biden win, but also that it was going to be a full-scale turn, a blue wave, where they were going to be able to push this capital gains increase from 23 to 46. They were going to be able to do these tax increases that they wanted to do, and all these other things that were monumental, but not for capitalists, right?
Yeah.
And they're much more, against capitalism as opposed to for capitalism, at least in those capacities. So, I mean, that's obviously a positive, and more importantly, it's a positive that it's business as usual, because in regards to asset prices, that means with the way the Fed's kind of come out and said that they're going to let the inflation run a little bit, it'll keep things kind of at least moving in a positive direction. Now, the coronavirus is an entirely different conversation, and
Correct.
you're seeing stuff go on right now as applies to the coronavirus that the case is increasing, and there's not really a whole lot of. I mean, it was inevitable, right? We've talked about this for 6 or 7 months, and the fact of it coming back and going into the end of the year and all that stuff. So it was inevitable. It's not as if it's a shock to anybody that it's back and the extent to which it's back. But I mean, the only favorable aspect of it is it appears that the mortality rate, the fatality rate has gone down relative to the cases, right?
Yes.
So, whereas in the early stages, it was, the numbers that were coming out were 5, 6, 7%, in some cases early on. Now we're down, at least on the daily cases, if you compare them, it's under, it's 1% and under. So it's still a huge concern. It's still a huge concern for business, right?
Well, it's not a concern like it's going to be in Europe. In Europe, it's totally locked down, and they're rioting because it's locked down.
Yeah, see, that's another thing about that. There's no way. Somebody had texted me yesterday, 2 days ago, and they were like, "Why is the market going up?" And I explained the same situation I'm talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
And the response was, "Well, what if Biden still does lockdowns?" I said, "Look, Biden's not going to do lockdowns if he doesn't have all the power, right? It helps when you have everything cornered, when you have the House, when you have the Senate. That helps greatly, right? That helps everything. When you have to sit there and make friends with everybody in order for things to be copacetic, if one cog in that giant plan that they put together, ranging from lockdowns to insanely high tax to all the new green plan, whatever it was,
Correct.
all the spending associated with it, in order to get one of them, you need all of them to work in conjunction with the next, right? And it was a fairly, I don't want to say it was a radical left, but it was a significantly left. The whole plan was, right? I mean, it wasn't middle of the road. There's a lot in that green plan that was left, right? Pretty left, not leaning left, but pretty left. I mean, to double the capital gains tax is insane, right?
Yes.
I mean, for somebody that doesn't have assets, it doesn't matter, but for people that have assets, that's insane, and it would have forced the sell-off in the market, which is why you saw a lot of people selling right? Because they were positioning. Because in all fairness, a lot of those institutions and hedge funds, et cetera, they had bean counters down there, right? They had people on the street, they had people down there counting, and they were positioning. And if you notice, a lot of the mail-in vote were Democrat, and a lot of the mail-in vote was Biden, which is why you saw the market sell off last week, because people were positioning ahead of it because they naturally assumed that they were going to be exposed to that capital gains tax, right?
Correct.
But fortunately, the one thing that people didn't anticipate was that people really do like Trump,
Correct.
right? And that there's a significant Trump vote out there that made this a real election, and it could still go either way. I
Yeah.
mean, in all fairness, I mean, this isn't over. This is still a situation that could go either way, and I think the kicker, like I said, was them not getting the Senate, because without the Senate, without both sides of it, nothing's going to get passed. So we effectively stand still, and it's business as usual. So in that,
But you also talked about some type of gridlock because the president is Democrat and because the Senate is Republican, nothing's gonna move. And some people have said it's nothing's gonna move for the next 2 years. It could be good or it could be bad.
it's going to be nah. Business as usual is good. So for the stock market, for that kind of stuff, it's good. For lending and for things like that, like for a consumer borrowing, that's a totally different conversation because that's more based upon how the individual consumer is doing, right? And if you believe that the individual consumer is gradually doing better, then you'll believe that going forward that banks will start to loosen up a little bit because some of that certainty will start to alleviate itself. I
Correct.
don't think that the individual consumer is doing better. I think that they're treading water in a lot of cases. I think there's some businesses that are doing good and continuing to grow, and I think the large majority of the retail businesses that were closed and the restaurants and stuff, I don't think they're doing better. I think that they're just doing, right? If you're a really good restaurant, you're making do and you're making money and you're paying your bills and et cetera, right? I got a number of clients that own restaurants. I have some down here in Florida, and I was with one last Saturday and we were talking about it. And I mean, the understanding is that if you made the necessary adjustments, you're doing all right. But that not every restaurant does 5, 6, 7 million a location, right?
Mm.
Some of them. I mean, the restaurant business, you may make 8, 9. I think on a good year, you might make 8, 9. I'm sorry, at a good location, you might make 8, 9, 10%, net revenue, right? So if you do 200,000, right, in gross revenue at a restaurant, you're making 20 grand,
Yeah.
right? If you make 5 million, obviously it's a different conversation. You're 500,000, you start backing out wages and costs, etc. But it's a very tight margin business, and I just think that when you take all that into consideration, I mean, look at the airlines. They furloughed half their workforce. They're not getting any extra. Nobody's going in there flying, even as much as they promise everybody that the air is clean in there. Nobody believes it because everybody's gotten on a plane and gotten sick 15 minutes later.
Yes.
So I mean, it's hard. It's a hard sell because we've all been burned by it. You start walking down that path and you say to yourself, "There's no way we're at January yet." But I mean, if you can sincerely believe that it starts to improve itself, then gridlock is not a bad thing because gridlock necessarily means everything's in place, which means that Trump's tax plan stays in place, which is the lower tax for all individual consumers, right? They'd have to vote that out. They'd have to get that reversed. They're not going to get that reversed. There's no way, right? They'd have to get everybody to agree to do that.
But how about raising taxes to start paying off the stimulus?
Well, that's a different conversation. I don't think that's going to now that it's gridlock like this and you're basically landlocked in this situation. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the discussions are going to start talking towards the end of next year because it's going to take them more than likely. If you figure, let's just play out a scenario: if Biden wins the end of this year, um, you know, I don't think Trump's going to do any. If Biden wins, I don't think Trump's going to do anything to help the situation. That's just my opinion, right? I think
Correct.
that they'll move stuff around, and over the next 2 months, I think it'll just basically be the way it was the last 4 months when they haven't pushed forward that new stimulus. And if you remember, I said the last podcast we had, there's no way they're going to do stimulus before the election because I
Mm.
knew the Democrats weren't going to agree to do that. And honestly, if the Republicans lose, it's going to be a slow drag from there, right? But there will be stimulus. It will probably be the new year, January or February, more than likely. And then when it is, it'll probably be diluted. And then from there, that's probably it on the stimulus front, right? It's
Mm.
going to be a targeted stimulus, and that's going to be the end of that conversation. how do you start paying it back, right? Because it's,
Yes.
like you and I talked about the other day, we have a $25 trillion economy, right? That's effectively what our economy is, give or take, depending on, if you back out some of the fluctuations here and there, GDP, but it's about 25 trillion. You figure we've lent close to 7 or 8 already, right?
Yes.
Trillion. And you're talking about the fact that they're asking for another trillion for the new one. So let's just say let's just call it an even 10 that was put towards this. That's almost 45% of your gross, your GDP. I mean, you're getting in huge danger zone levels of borrowing, right?
Yes.
What I was explaining to you is that when you're a country, it's almost like it's not, but it is, in that the way they measure their leverage is based upon almost similar, if anybody's familiar with a merchant cash advance, where they take your revenues and then you lever against your revenues. So if you have a property, you lever against that piece of collateral. Well, the United States, their collateral, for argument's sake, and how they leverage broadly, is the amount of their GDP, which is 25 trillion. Well, in the last 9 months, theoretically, assuming they get another trillion for this next stimulus tranche, you're talking about like 40%. That's huge. That's unsustainable, right? I mean, when you think about all the debt outside of that, so they have to start paying that back. It's not debatable, but I just don't think it's going to be in the first year. I think the conversation will start to percolate. I just don't think it's going to happen, because I think that they're going to have a lot of difficulty getting on the same page. And I think the Republicans are going to do what they do if Trump loses, and they're going to run interference the same way the Democrats ran interference before. If you want to see how this plays out, go back to Obama in his first term, okay? Go see how much he got done in that first term. Everything he proposed, they shot down.
Yes.
I mean, very, very, very difficult when you don't have everybody working together and working towards a common goal, because I think that they're going to have a lot of difficulty getting on the same page, and I think the Republicans stay the same. And
Yes.
if you back out COVID from the last couple of years, economy has been pretty consistent, right? Asset prices have gone up, and values have gone up, and people have made money, and slowly wages creeped up, and pre-February unemployment
Best economy of our lives, said Jim Cramer in MSNBC or whatever.
CNBC, and the January of 2020, we had unemployment at like 2.3%. It's the lowest I've ever seen it. The point I'm trying to make is that it's not necessarily a bad thing, which is why you're seeing markets respond this way. The one X factor in the conversation is you got to get the virus under control, which
Yes.
I think if Biden comes in and he doesn't try and be aggressive about lockdowns and all that nonsense, because I think he knows the United States people will not go for that, especially how this presidential race came out. You know what I mean? How it was so split, and it literally, if he somehow ekes a win out here, it's going to be like, look, people are not running Democrat here. This is not like an overwhelming Democrat victory. This is like, you got out by the skin of your teeth.
Yeah.
You need to understand the people you're dealing with. You try and pull a shutdown again, which you were running on the whole time, you're going to get a revolt. It's just going to happen. So I just don't see, when you don't have all the cards, you can't play it. So I just don't see that happening. But I do see, ultimately, that they will get the stimulus pushed through, and then after that, I think there's going to just be a lot of nonsense. But I do see him trying to bring a plan for COVID, right? As opposed to what Trump did with, where Trump, that he didn't want to get involved in assisting the Democratic cities, right? And some of the Democratic states, he left it all on the governors and whatnot. And because of that, we're sitting here in kind of a fragmented country where certain states respond certain ways, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As opposed to one consistent response that should be implemented across the board to eliminate the confusion, the conjecture, the delineation, etc., that has gone on, right? Down here in Florida, I mean, for the exception of maybe a month or two, and the fact that in some areas you got to wear masks sometimes. I mean, it really hasn't been that much different, right? I mean, it really hasn't. I mean, when I went up to Philly, like we made that podcast when I was in Philly for the summer for a short period. I mean, it was like a zombieville, right?
Yeah.
It was shut down everywhere. So I'm just saying that it should be consistent. I think that's one thing that he can positively, if he doesn't, bring to the table, and that would be something I think that would help greatly, because I think once you can get that underway, and you can start getting comfortability with people flying again. And the way to get people comfortable with flying is to make them feel like if they get on a plane, plane, then they're not going to get sick from the person next to them. And the way they're trying to go about that now is to make sure that you either get tested going in,
Mm.
or before you get on the plane, you got to get tested for COVID. Now I don't know how that works with refunds, and I think this is why the airplanes were so reluctant to really do anything, because it absolutely made no capital expenditure to adjust to this, which I don't understand at all. Right? I mean, there's so many different things they could have done for the last 9 months in an effort to try and encourage people to come on planes. They've done nothing.
Correct.
They don't even put partitions between the seats. Like you get when I go to the grocery store, there's a lady in a riot suit that I'm trying to pay, right, for food. But when you go on a plane, you don't even get a plexiglass partition between the seats, right? They just leave a middle seat open.
You're gonna have to rebuild. You're gonna have to rebuild a new plane. You're gonna have to. You know how much that's gonna cost?
But I think there's other ways around that. I think that they could. What they're doing. Number one, they should have put the plexiglass in between them, right? I mean, they should have done some kind of capital expenditure a long time ago that would have given people peace of mind, right? But outside of that, what they're talking about doing is making anybody that gets on a plane get tested before they get on the plane.
Well,
Right?
I'm okay with them putting that gun in my forehead. You know how they put the
Yeah, to check your temperature, but
the
that's not
check
going
your
to be enough for
temperature.
people. They're trying to cater to the family that's trying to go to Disney from up north, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
understand what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
they're trying to get everybody, not just somebody that is the individual flyer. So in order to do that, you got to come up with a broad plan. I just don't know why it takes 9 months, right? Like why is it taking you 9 months to come up with the idea that you're gonna make people get tested before they come on the airplane? Or that you make, even with that, you should also have the plexiglass in between, right? Just because
Yes.
it's in people's brains right now, right? Build it so that you can remove it, or don't. Just do something, right? Do
Correct.
something, and don't just sit back and complain that people aren't getting back on planes. People aren't getting back on planes because you've done nothing to make an adjustment, right? I
Correct.
mean, you go to a restaurant; they've been forced to make so many different adjustments, um, uh, to accommodate, to get people back in the door, and to have people coming in. And I just feel the airlines feel so entitled; they don't have to do anything. And then they just sit and they ask for more money. It's like, come on, man, it's not how it's done. I mean, the one thing that people have learned in this whole COVID process is this year and COVID, if a business was on the downfall, all this did was accelerate it, right?
Yes.
If a business was on the come up and it was more technologically advanced and it was in the future, and it was discounting in the future, that business took off, right? I.e. Zoom, right?
Yes.
Technologies like that, Square, PayPal, things like that, Amazon that has always taken off, but it took off even more. Things like that, things that were playing into the future and were already 3 steps ahead. This accelerated that. The businesses that were behind got left behind, unfortunately, and I don't say that in a cavalier way. It's just unfortunately that's the way it is, right?
Yes.
And so, like, it's shocking to me that you're the airline and you get all this money, trillions of dollars, and then they got more money, and they still haven't put any capital expenditure in. I understand they have a burn rate, which is insane. And for anybody who doesn't know what a burn rate is, it means the amount of money that they spend on a monthly and a daily basis. It's some insane amount of money that they have in order to just run. But it's like the only way that you're going to get people back in planes is not by sitting back and waiting for the virus to go away. It's just not going to happen. And even after that, let's just say there's a vaccine. Let's just say, for argument's sake, there's a vaccine. You think that people are just going to, the people who were going to fly before are just going to take the vaccine and jump on a plane? It's like, come on, man. You got to crawl before you walk. I mean, you're going to have to shake this out of people's brains even after the vaccine, right? It's just going to, a lot of people aren't going to take the vaccine because they're not going to trust it. But the
Correct.
people that do take it, you're going to have to get them comfortable again with behaviors that were pre-January 2020. And I think that's going to be, what is going to be the deciding factor for us to kind of, migrate back to a way of life, at least our new normal way of life.
Does it make a difference as far as interest rates for homes, vehicles, credit cards? Who's in the president?
Right. So interest rates, broadly speaking, for the Fed, right? The Fed sets the interest rates that everybody kind of walks off of, right? So the Fed, we had a whole podcast on interest rates
Correct.
in the past,
Correct.
but just in a very brief response. So interest rates, the Fed sets interest rates based upon how well the economy is doing. Okay, and Jay Powell in August said he's not even thinking about raising rates. Okay, so that's how, and he has not once tell you that interest rates are going to stay low, and they're going to stay low for a while until it can be sustained. And the fact of the matter is that with that in mind, mortgage rates will stay lower. Credit card
Correct.
rates, although they're insane, if you're a good borrower, maybe they'll be in the high single digits. If you're somebody that's borrowing from Capital One, they don't even lend off of any variable. They just say, listen, we're going to hit you with 30%, and that's how you're going to have to deal with it. Same with First Premier and a lot of cases Credit One. But if you get into auto loans, SBA loans, things like that, they're going to stay low because they're tied to Fed funds rates, right? In most cases, and Fed window rates. And as long as they stay low, and the Fed's come out and said everything over the course of time that they have no interest in doing anything other than providing more support for the economy, raising interest rates pressures the economy. It causes more pressure on people because the borrowing costs go up, and subsequently it takes money out of the economy. So, because of that, they're not going to go up. So this is what I'm saying. When I say business as usual, by this being kind of gridlocked and landlocked with the way it appears it's going to play out with the Senate and the House, business as usual means business as usual. It means you're not going to see any extraordinary adjustments, and you're just going to tread water with the way things were pre, right? And like I said,
Okay.
if you can figure out the virus and get that underway, and all the other things stay the same, I mean, end of next year, I think we could start to see some degree of semblance correlating to a new normal that could somehow track back to the beginning of last year when things were really humming along, right?
Well, either or, right? And I think we're done with the conversation of interest rates if you're done, because I want to move into if we're going into whether it's Biden or Trump, what's going to happen with real estate and foreclosures? I mean, when Obama got in, we had a recession with, the banks got bailed out. I had a bunch of foreclosures. Everyone, all the customers that we've had has a lot of them when we started working together has been 3, 4 properties that were in foreclosure that I need to get off my credit report because things didn't happen the way that I wish it would happen. 2008, 2009. I
Silver
still have a
letter.
foreclosure. Correct. So is it gonna happen either way with a Biden administration, or are we just on our way to a shit show when it comes to real estate and home prices? Because right now, just the other day, I saw another a realtor. This home sold $25,000 over asking price, and you
Yeah,
know
well, I mean, everybody listens to this. I know how I feel about that, but I mean, I think what will ultimately end up happening is and we talked about this before. There was a when all that stimulus was pumped into the market, whether it be through EIDL, PPP, extra unemployment,
yes,
checks just mailed out to people, right? Coupled with the fact that there was this huge transition from cities to suburbs because people now were working from home.
yep,
They didn't have to go into the office. They're not going to probably go back to have to go into the office 7 days a week. So they wanted to make that transition. All that perfect storm helped to prop up this real estate market, right? Helped for and plus there was very low inventory, right?
correct,
There was a tremendously low amount of inventory. So that helped prop things up, right? It subsequently helped prop things up over the course of time as it applies to the last 6 months and these outrageous numbers that we're selling in and these moronic, Facebook posts. But the fact of the matter, though, is that this past month, existing home sales were the lowest in like, I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is that now that stimulus is gone and out of the system, people are realizing that jobs are being cut. I mean, ESPN just cut. I think it was 30,000 or
30,000
35,000.
jobs. ESPN.
ESPN.
ESPN,
You
like
know,
worldwide sports, ESPN in Georgia.
ESPN just cut. I think it was yesterday, and that was after. And Disney owns ESPN, so
Yes, yes, yes.
Disney 2 weeks ago cut 40,000 jobs, 50,000, some ridiculous number. And if you watch, because they don't put it on the front page, it always gets skirted to the back, or if you know how to look for it. But a lot of these companies are trimming down. And they're trimming down because they can. And I talked about this in a previous podcast. In situations like this, even if they don't need to, they use it as an excuse,
Mm,
right? They use it as an excuse to cut costs. If they're still making good money in this market, they're like, man, we don't need all these people. And it all boils down, especially if you're a publicly traded company, it boils down to that price per share, to those earnings reports, right? And if you can
yes.
cut out 15, 20, 25, 30,000 jobs, and I think obvious reasons, right? Some of them aren't even open yet. The one in California has been open for like a year. The one down here in Florida is like running at like 20% capacity, right? I don't know how the ones over in China and other parts of the world are doing, but not nearly at full capacity. You look at the sports business, and I mean, it's been closed half the year. The other half of the year, it's like makeshift. You know what I mean? So even though they're just positioned horribly for this situation. You know what I mean? And subsequently, they're laying off because they have to, more than likely, to offset loss of revenue. But I mean, you look at a lot of other businesses, and large businesses who probably aren't impacted directly to the same extent, and they're using it as an excuse. The point I'm trying to make is that if you tie it all together, with unemployment, I know they just came out with existing claims. It was like 750, 760,000
Correct.
or whatever. And I know last month they said that unemployment was like 9% or something like that, or whatever it came in at. But not the U6, but the U3, I think, or whatever it is they use, the one that's kind of diluted and doesn't count the people that left the workforce and doesn't really take into consideration everything. When you count the fact that going into the end of this year with all these other different variables that I'm describing, that we could really see. I mean, in all fairness, I mean, the economists thought that unemployment was gonna pull back exponentially, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've topped out around 15, 16%, and they thought it was going to pull back exponentially over the course, and it's been a really, really incrementally slow drag, right?
Yes.
And you're coming into the end of the yeyear where a lot of restaurants up north, where a lot of
Jay, it's
taking like
getting cold. It's getting cold
yeah,
up here, bro.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't eat outside. I mean, it doesn't matter how many heat lamps they put up there. So you figure that the gig economy in our country is roughly 48 million people. Gig economy meaning resorts, hotels, restaurants, bartenders, etc. Right?
Yes.
Just if you consider that, you have to take into consideration that's a huge contributor to our broader unemployment rate. And when we get into an area where they can't get people in there because there's been absolutely no indication, at least in the northern part of this country, that in Northeast that they're going to be opening up capacity, and Cuomo's even said he's cutting it even more. I think I read an article last week that said he's trying to figure out a way to not let anybody that's from outside of New York come into New York.
Oh, we're
So
gonna have to get tested right there at the Holland Tunnel, Lincoln Tunnel, George Washington Bridge before we go in.
that's what I'm saying. And I mean, look, again, if this is what it ultimately ends up taking to get to be our new normal, unfortunately, this is what we're probably going to deal with even after it
Yeah.
it subsides. But this is just what the new normal looks like, so that people can get back to some degree of normalization and the economy can get back to some degree of normalization. And this is how it works, right? This is how new things get implemented into our process and into our functionality, and this is how it ends up working. But what I'm trying to say is that with unemployment ticking up, not only did you extract the stimulus, but you're extracting jobs, right? So if the unemployment stays going into the end of the year, let's just say 10, 11, 12%, and I've talked about this 100 times, you're effectively taking, and you take all the stimulus out of it, because that was what that burst was for, buying, right? From July to well, I guess it was closer to May to probably around August. That burst of buying was right centered in that period of time. So if you extract that stimulus out of there, right, and you say to yourself, with unemployment ticking up and unemployment running at about 10, 11%, which it probably will. I mean, the idea that it's going to continue to go down is, at least on a U6 or a much more realistic level, is probably not realistic. But even if it's just, let's just say it hums around 10, 11%, that's one buyer that you're extracting from the buyer pool, because we were effectively at full employment in January. So when you take the stimulus out, which is just gift money, and because a lot of people were taking that EIDL money and they were going out and they were running it in all kinds of cockamamie schemes, right?
Yes.
Like people were getting 150 grand from EIDL and going to put it in the stock market.
Yes.
And 150 grand and going to buy their own house with it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there was too much money coming around there that wasn't going to the right area.
Correct.
And a lot of that had to do with people being able to go out and buy. Well, that money's gone now. The people that didn't know how to manage it, it's all gone. The people that did know what they were doing with it and were smart about it, they still got it, because that's their safety net, right? If things turn, that's what they're. But a lot of people didn't do that, unfortunately, and a lot of people used it for all these alternative things, which in a lot of cases, no disrespect, didn't pan out for them, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of that money also helped contribute to buying houses, right? And it helped buy those houses, it helped keep things propped up, and now it's gone. There's no more of that. It's not coming back.
Oof.
right? It's not going to come back in like a broad scale. It's going to be targeted, right? And it's going to be targeted for the particular businesses that need it. And they weren't the ones that were pumping 150 grand into the stock market when they haven't ever made a trade in their entire life, right? They took a
Correct.
tutorial on how to place a trade on a merit trade, and then the next thing you know, they piped 150 grand into it, right? And I mean, that, you want to talk, you might as well just buy it in chips and take it to the casino, right? I mean, I'm not trying to judge anybody. I'm just saying that the fact that the government was willing to give that kind of money at that extent is a gift. But the bigger concern is that a lot of these people don't understand. You and I have talked about this before. That the SBA doesn't play around, right? The only person this whole year that has been lending is the SBA on a business level, okay? And the EIDL loans, a lot of the PPP loans were forgiven if you weren't trying to run a scam on them and you just followed their menial procedures. But
Correct.
a lot of people got money from the EIDL, and a lot of people got a lot of money from the EIDL. And those
Yes.
EIDL loans are 30-year loans, okay? So you can pay it back early. There's no prepayment penalty, but you have to, the minimum payment, I think, on 150 grand, I got a client one was like $700, right? Which is cheap. How many years do you think that people are gonna make that payment?
Oof.
How many though?
No, not
How many?
many.
Let's just play this out because I know how this goes,
Okay.
right? Because I look at people's credit reports, and I deal on the finance side all day long, so I know how this goes. They're gonna pay because they've, especially the ones that blew it, right? Pumped it into some cockamamie scheme, no judgment, but pumped into some scheme and it's gone, right? Or
Yes.
almost all of it's gone. They don't have to make a payment for the first 12 months, right? So after that 12 month, they're gonna have to make that first payment. They're gonna be like, fuck, right? Because now it's coming out of their operating budget. Whether they make more money or they're in a worse position, now who knows?
Yes.
But when you stop paying the SBA is not like Chase Bank, right? The SBA is not like Prosper or Lending Club or Capital One, where they'll call you 150 times. No.
Hmm.
SBA is like the Department of Education, like the IRS, right?
Oh.
They will subtly slit your throat, right? And then next thing you know, you have liens everywhere. And people don't understand this because most people don't get SBA loans. And most of the people, there's normally a very high qualifying requirement to get an SBA loan.
Well,
Right?
you
So
got to have over 700 credit scores, even during the Rona.
You have to have over 700 credit score. Your business has to be fully documentedly profitable, right? Under any circumstance. So you're running a real operation in a normal environment, right?
Correct.
You're making money. In this situation, they didn't even ask for tax returns. They knew. I mean, Mnuchin came out and said, "Look, we're expecting 10 to 15% fraud, just from the door." That's what he said.
He said how much? 10 to 15% fraud. Wow.
Meaning that bad actors, right?
Yes.
But take that off the table, and you think about the people that borrowed and either it didn't help them, or how many years? Most people don't even pay off their 30-year mortgage because they refinance that debt, right? Either to make it cheaper or they move.
Someone
right?
just said Al Maculo just said 5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years for houses, yeah, to live in a house, exactly. That's how long. That's the average that people either stay in their house or they keep their mortgage for. Now, understand this. Think about this. If you're a business that wasn't profitable before, and the SBA lent you, let's just say, 80 grand, okay, and you weren't profitable before, and you've paid 3 or 4 years of it, right? And you're like, damn, do I still owe this? Because most people that have that kind of amortization, like school loans, right?
Yes.
Nobody, they pay like 6 months. Like, man, I don't want to fucking pay this. You know what I mean? And then they figure out ways to modify it, and the school loan companies offer that, right? And then you can get it down if you don't make enough money. You can get it down, and you can lower it, you can defer it, do all that shit. The SBA is not going to be able to do that. They're not going to have the ability to do that because they're going to expect this to be paid back over time. And there's not going to be an opportunity for these companies to refinance that, even though I don't know why they would want to, because it's a 30-year and nobody offers on business loans 30 years. I mean, the SBA typically, the longest that they would go out if there was no real estate involved would be 10 years.
Wow.
Right? And they would lever assets of yours in order to get to 10 years. So the fact that they're at 30 years, I mean, I think that's going to be a whole different level of confusion that's going to exist once people start to see the fangs that are going to come out as a result of the SBA, right? Because they're not just going to swallow people being like, fuck you, I'm not paying you. You know what I mean? It's not going to be like that. It's not going to be like that. And it's the same people probably that thought they could flip off the Department of Education. Here we are 4 years later. They're realizing that they will chase them around. We had another client we talked to the other day.
Correct.
That took out school loans 20 years ago. They're still coming after her.
Correct.
They're still coming. They're not
And
going
it's not
away.
like
They don't
it's not like it's
go
80
away.
grand, right? It's like 5 grand, 9 grand. You know, the easiest thing to do is get on a payments plan.
I mean, they offer so many payment options now that are so cheap and so economical. There's no reason not to do it, right? I mean, they
Correct.
literally give you an overwhelming amount of reasons to do it as opposed to not do it, right? The point I'm trying to make though is I think that's going to be a big problem for businesses going forward. You saddle people with debt, and if they were already tight and now they got to start paying and they don't have the ability to pay or they resent it, because I've had many conversations with people that took out school loans
Yes.
and they took out a lot. They didn't even end up doing what they went to school
Well, how
for. They
many
didn't
people wanted to be doctors and they got over 150,000 and then they come to us?
doctors are normally 500,000, but even better. I mean, not better, but the it's more the people that go to school and don't finish, right?
Yes.
So they take 3 years of school loans, they don't finish, they don't graduate, and they look back at those loans as a disaster, right? And they don't want to pay it, they resent it. I can't help but think that that's exactly what's going to happen with a lot of these SBA loans, and I can't even imagine what the default rate's going to be, and I can't even imagine because there's just no precedent for it how the SBA is going to handle it.
SBA goes on the credit report, Jay?
Oh, it will. It doesn't typically, no, because it normally what they do is they take a UCC filing against your business.
Ooh.
So a UCC filing is effectively a lien against your business for all your assets. So if you don't, they have the ability to go after all your assets,
Okay.
business and personal related, if you don't pay them, which is what I'm trying to explain. I mean, that's standard. That's standard business, right? For the SBA to do that. If you take an SBA loan, not only do they in a normal environment, they will lien everything you have. Let's say you borrow 500,000 from the SBA, they'll put a lien against your house, they'll put a lien against your car, they'll put a lien against any asset that you're buying, any asset you have, in order to get that number as close to that 500,000 that you're trying to borrow as possible, so they have the least amount of exposure. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
So that on top of that, they add another UCC filing on top of that. So if there's anything you're hiding, they get it if you don't pay them. And if you don't work out with them some kind of a resolution, right? See, normally there's a bank that's a liaison in between, right?
Yes. A
So
servicer.
the bank that counts against the bank's relationship with them. So the banks go out of their way to try and facilitate that, right? Try to if you have a problem with an SBA loan and you're a business, they'll try to figure out a way to work it out with you. That's not going to happen with the SBA. Because the SBA doesn't have any numbers that they have to hit for the SBA. The SBA is the SBA, right? So I just think that that's going to be a real eye opener. I personally don't believe wages are going to go up next year. I think wages are probably going to. I mean, they always move very.
Well, didn't Florida put $15 an hour minimum?
They put it on the ballot and asked how everybody feels about it, and the very clear answer to that is certain states can absorb it. This is not the time to be asking about $15 or minimum wage. It's fucking insane. I mean, half the business aren't even open. Why would you even bring it up now? I mean,
So
it's
it
the
was on the
dumbest
like
fucking question ever.
marijuana was in the ballot for New Jersey, which I said yes to marijuana. Okay.
Absolutely, yes. But no, not just for the recreational benefit, because it brings money in, right? It brings money into the state, just like gambling. That's why gambling. I own DraftKings stock, right? They passed like 5 other states over the last 48 hours added gambling because they need the money.
Okay.
When you say that you want to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour, you're taxing us as business owners, right? You're
Yes.
basically turning around. You're saying, yeah, no, don't worry about it. We won't do this. But we'll try and push $15 an hour on you. Why would you do
They
that
don't
right
sell
now?
it. They don't sell it the way that you're talking about it right now, Jay.
Of course they don't sell it like that, because if they sell like that, then everybody will understand it, right?
Correct.
They make a pointed effort, and when I say they, I mean every social media outlet, individual or conglomerate, makes a very, very pointed effort to not explain things in depth, so that most of the people paying attention have no fucking idea what they're watching, right? Absolutely no idea, right? They just make an opinion based upon something. If you could walk any subject back, that's the reality, though. Like when you go into a lot of states approve gambling they need the revenue. That's why if you remember in June, July, August, New York was pleading for money from Trump. Remember,
Oh
saying
yes,
they
yes,
need the
yes.
money. Jersey was saying the
The
same
rich
thing.
people are leaving. The rich people, 40% of the rich people left New York City.
Yeah, how do you replace that? Again, if you're we talked about this in previous podcasts. If your government, whether it's state government, federal government, the only way you make money is on tax.
Hmm.
So if you bring in gambling now, and that's $100 billion business, and in your state it might be a $2 billion business, and you're charging a 10% sales tax, well, that's a shitload of money, isn't it?
Yes.
And if you knew you're losing money because of all these other variables, COVID related and just debt related and so on and so forth, then you don't have a choice. Which is why you're going to see a lot of other states start to approve marijuana. It's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Over the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see them all adopt it. Absolutely no argument. Over the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to see all of them ultimately adopt gambling because they need that money. It's so much money that they need to start monetizing it. Because they're not making a lot of, well, look, they make the amount of money they make, but the problem is that they need more to offset whatever they're being absorbed as a result of COVID and all the changes that are going on.
All my boys that I go to the bar with, they always talk about, DraftKings, and they always gamble. Every Sunday, I'm getting text messages. Oh, over and under this, and I bet it on this. I'm gonna cash out, $210. That's the only time where watching sports is fun when you're betting. But they can't go to New York City and place a bet because it tracks. They don't let you. So you have to be in New Jersey in order for your GPS to work and in order for you to place a bet.
Well,
So
but New York hasn't approved gambling yet, though.
correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, like, again, even the states and the cities that don't want to do it have
Correct.
to do it. You see what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. Look, I love DraftKings as a stock. I think the growth is endless, right? Because when you start taking into consideration all these states approving it, they're at a very baseline right now, very early stage. But if you think about the fact that, like you just said, it was a very good example. Guys you grew up that you hang out with, they might bet $50 a game here, $50 a game there.
Yep.
The house always wins, right? I mean, always. It's not a question. So you're making profit from the games. They're making juice on the games. They're making juice on the growth. They're making juice on just fantasy. I mean, it's a very well orchestrated business model that is in the infant stages, right? But broadly speaking, though, so is gambling in this country, right? It's so early. It's like pot. It's the same idea, and that is a genius. That is a great idea to put that on the ballot, right? And get a vibe from everybody. Like, listen, are you guys good with if we add this? If you're good, how do you feel about adding marijuana? Blah blah blah. Of course, man. That's what you should be asking on the ballot. You should be saying, "Hey, listen, you think it's time to add $15 an hour?" Yeah, it's great fucking time, asshole. Add it now in the middle of the worst economy we're dealing with, and who knows when. Great fucking time to ask the question. Right?
Yo, everybody's like, "Yay, $15 an hour! Yeah, so progressive." And I'm
Yeah,
like,
but it's insane. I mean, first of all, in a normal economy, in a normal functioning economy, January of 2020, there's only a handful of cities in this country that could sustain that. Right?
that is
New
true.
York City, New
That
York
is
City,
true.
obviously being one of them. Seattle being one of them. Los Angeles potentially being one of them.
Correct.
Miami being one of them. Everywhere where the cost of living is insanely high and it's justified. If you move it out to Mobile, Alabama, there's no fucking way that they're going to be able to support $15 an hour minimum wage. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The economics don't work. So I don't know why they dangle these carrots in front of people. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't. You say that this isn't the way it's pitched to you. Of course, that's not the way it's pitched to you. If you think about some of the shit some of these politicians say on a regular basis, we're going to get rid of all your school loans. We're going to get you $15 an hour. We're going to move this and move that, and it's going to make this. They don't ever do anything. Ever.
Correct.
The only in real talk, I know everybody despises. A lot of people despise, not everybody, but a large amount of people despise him. He's divided the entire country. He's probably the most polarizing human being I've ever seen.
Correct.
But the reality is that Trump is one of the few people that has actually gotten done the things that he said he was going to do. Now, he hasn't gotten them all done, but he's gotten a good chunk of them done in one term. So everybody can hate on him all he wants, but the tax bill that he pushed forward, if you really understand taxes, it was a dream, right? Like, if you're somebody that has a pass-through company, it was a dream, right? I mean,
Correct.
I'm not saying I'm not saying getting into anything political or any of his personal beliefs, but I'm saying that he pushed things through. If you go back, now granted, he did have a Republican House for the first part of it, Republican House, Republican Senate, which helped make things easier to get things done. I'm just saying that it's not easy to actually have to follow through with what you say you're going to do on the trail, right? So you saying that that's not how it's being pitched. It's not being pitched like that because they're politicians. The only time
Correct.
they're not lying is when they're sleeping, right?
Correct.
And so, I mean, it's just the way it is. In order for us to rationalize it as consumers and as citizens, we have to pick it apart, right? And in order to be able to do that, we have to do the economics of it, because that's all they're doing. Like,
So
that's the only way they make money. So that's all they're doing. They're looking at it from an economic perspective. I still don't understand, why the question. I mean, about the $15 an hour. I don't know where that comes from. I don't know why. I mean, that's just a carrot, right? I'm surprised they didn't say, "How would you feel about getting $250,000 in school loans forgiven?" I'd feel terrible, Joe. I'd feel terrible about it. Don't do it. I mean, of course they're gonna fucking say, "Yeah, man, that's a great idea." I mean, what if we had a standard salary for human beings on this planet? It was $4 million. How would you feel about that? I'd feel fucking great, right?
yeah.
I mean, it's like some of this stuff is just so fucking stupid that it just doesn't make any sense. It just plays on people's, like, it's almost as if they talk to people like they're idiots. And it's like, it's kind of
Well,
like a
there is well, you have some people in the right and in the left that'll just look at you and tell you you're an uninformed, you know, voter. You know,
wow, for sure,
if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you read books, you're uninformed. I mean, it's crazy how they look at you when
listen.
you kind of know what you're talking about.
I, 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 I really, really, really hope. The one thing I hope for going into whoever wins the election is that whoever it is can bring some unity back, right? I mean, we are. Everybody's been saying this since day one, since Trump was elected. But it
Correct.
is. There's not just a divide. There's like a fault line. There's like a crevice, right? I mean, it is. It is a very. I mean, it's insane how divided we are, right? And there's like factions within that division, right? I mean, factions are developing within people that support Biden and people that support Trump. Before, it just used to be, it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And I think that whoever it is that comes in, hopefully, will try to do that, because we need it badly as a country. I think a lot of the Democrats thought that they were going to blow out this election, and it was going to be a blowout, and they were going to wake up that morning, and it was, they just couldn't believe that there's people that really sincerely believe in Trump and like Trump
Well,
and his beliefs.
the media lost, Jay. The media, people who saw that the media was just, you know, provoking, really the media is the one to blame for all this that's happening.
Yeah, listen, I think that when you say media, it's not a broad term, right? It's not just television. It's the
No,
social media. It's social media. It's newspapers. It's everything. It's the
correct.
whole gambit. It's YouTube. It's the whole gambit. It's everything. And the ability of these, especially on this, I mean, on these social media outlets to once you understand how they operate, and they just inundate you with stories that you seem like you're interested in, and you go down that wormhole.
Oh,
I mean,
forget it.
they got you hooked. It's
Oh
over.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
over.
yeah.
It's over. And I think that has a polarizing effect on people, and a lot of people in our country are they're on Google, Facebook, Insta, etc., and they're just getting piped through these wormholes, and they can't get out. So and it goes from a decision when you're electing a president, and you should be looking at it from an economic perspective, a morality perspective,
Correct.
all these different variables that you should be looking at rationally. It goes out the door. It becomes immediately an emotional decision, right? That's all this has been. It's been nothing but an emotional decision. And when people start making decisions based on emotion, it's irrational. It's not a question of if it's irrational. It largely is irrational. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying people's motives for not liking Trump or people's motives for not liking Biden are all irrational. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying when you're basing your decision off watching, conspiracy theory about Biden and separately Trump, and you've gone down that wormhole, and that's what you're predicating your whole thought belief on. It's not that it's not right. It's just it's devoid of what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
nobody is going to be able to substantiate that, because some of these stories are so terrible
Well,
that
just think
nobody.
about that life. I'm from El Salvador. I came to this country not to, to get away from communist, socialist, uh, people that were trying to, guerrilla warfare. guerrilleros, which are called in Spanish, back in 1989. You know what I'm saying? And George Bush the first implemented some things so that people from countries like mine could come into immigrate into the United States. But I didn't come here to be a social, to make America a socialist or a communist country. I mean, that's what's being sold. That's what's trying to be sold. I mean, that's what these far leftists are trying to do. And on top of that, they're trying to make policies that are into that. I don't know if you want to get into the
No, I don't want to get too much into the policies, but the
yeah,
fact of the matter is that if you take just that modicum of truth, right? Let's just say that that's true, and let's just say the far left, that's exactly what they're about, right? Which I'm
correct,
not disagreeing, or I'm not even getting into that. But let's just say the good news is that it's not going to happen
correct,
because the Senate and the House are gridlocked. So none
correct.
of that nonsense is going to get pushed through. That only happens if it's a blue wave.
Mm,
Right? That only happens if it's a blue wave. There's absolutely no way that any Republican would go along with any of those radical left measures, right? If that was a valid concern. So that's why I keep saying it's business as usual, because none of that would get pushed through. There's no way for Biden to do some kind of an emergency measure to implement them. And even if he did, it wouldn't get pushed through because it's still got to get approved. Even on executive measures are typically for emergency related scenarios, and none of them are, right? So if you think about it, it ends up being it's a concern. It's a valid concern, but if you think about and you understand how this stuff works, you know that that concern is now off the table,
mm,
whether Biden or Trump win, right?
correct. Yes.
It's irrelevant. It's off the table now.
Yes.
We're more probably, in all fairness, we're probably more in an involuntary way, more left and right leaning. We're back in that range than we were before the election with the
Yes.
way it's set up now.
Yeah.
And that's where we exist as a country. We exist in a left and right leaning society in a normal universe, right?
Yes.
The majority of the people in our country vote left or right leaning, and that lean is largely indicative of a number of different variables, right? Depending on the human being and the level of education and understanding, et cetera. But that's how we exist. If there was an independent party in this country, it would probably be so fucking popular because so many people live in that world where they're not committed to a party. They're committed to the middle and they want to make a decision based on the individual, right?
Correct.
So now when you get it, we're back there now. Now, I mean, that's where we're going to go forward because we're gridlocked. So now there's not that advantage in either way. So the only things that are going to get passed are going to be middle of the road stuff.
Well, I
Not
think that
anything radical.
both parties are gonna have to rethink how to
Yeah.
communicate with people.
Listen, let me tell you something. If Trump loses, okay, if Trump loses, let's just say Trump loses, all these people that were out supporting some of the behavior, you're going to see them walk it back, right? The ones that don't inherently mean it. I'm not talking about like the Lindsey Grahams. I'm talking about the guys that came out of their own character to be Trump. You understand what I mean? Like the ones that needed the support of Trump in order to get reelected. So they played a role, they played an act, which all these guys are, I mean, it's political theater. That term isn't cliche for a reason, right? It's
Correct.
cliche for a reason. But I mean, there's a number of them that
Give
came
me
to
give
the
me an
surface.
example so the people could kind of get an idea.
Uh, I forget his name from
Romney? You talking about
who?
Romney?
Who?
Romney?
No, 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 no. Please, he's the one that came out and spoke against Trump.
That's I
Um,
think I'm thinking that you're thinking about that.
no,
There was a
I'm
guy in
talking
New
about.
Jersey, by Wildwood area, and he was a Democrat, but he switched over to Republican, and that's when he went to Trump and said, "I want to switch up to Republican," and that's when Trump went to Wildwood and had his big rally over there, and I guess is that type of what you're talking about?
Yeah, look, I'm talking about people that went out of their character, right? There's some people that, I mean, look, Lindsey Graham is a good example of somebody that is going to be Lindsey Graham, right? I mean, he's somebody that was a big supporter of Trump. He was like his personality was like that before Trump, and they just were their personalities are both consistent with what they're pushing. There's a lot of senators on the Republican side, not all of them, but a lot of them that took on these alternative personalities to mesh with Trump's approach, which it's not a comfortable fit. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that what's going to end up happening over the course of time is, although there was a lot of Republican support, I think you're going to start to see that perspective scale back as we start to unify, however long that takes. That could take a decade.
Okay.
In all fairness, you understand what I mean? That's not gonna happen overnight.
Van
But I'm saying,
Drew. Van Drew. Yeah, Van Drew, the guy from New Jersey, Kevin Clark. Van Drew. I believe that was him. Um, that went from Democrat and then he became a Republican while, Donald Trump was in the presidency.
I mean,
I
but
f-
you gotta question a guy that flips sides like that in the first place, right? I mean, it's different when us as individuals switch part. You know, if you're a right or left leaning voter, which is like I said earlier, is not unusual. It's not uncommon for you to vote for the for the senator, Democrat, for the president, or Republican, depending on how you view the individual. It's very unorthodox for people to switch parties, man.
oh,
You know what
yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, you got to question you know, where that individual sits on the spectrum. You know, if that's happening, I'm shocked. And the guy got elected for that. Yeah, because he probably stole that he took the Trump. Well, actually, New Jersey's such a Democratic state.
Jeff Van Drews. That was his name. Jeff Van Drews. But go ahead. Yeah,
No,
New
yeah,
Jersey is such a Democrat. Yeah, New Jersey's always been blue.
yeah. So it's weird that somebody would. Who knows, man? Who knows? I don't even
Well,
want to get
check
into
this
that.
out. Check this out. I had got Al Maculo who said to com- to compete globally, it can't be to compete globally, it can't be just one party or one race. We have to put them personal feelings, personal beliefs down and get some shit done.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that goes without saying. The problem is that you know, um, from a corporate level, you see that happen, right? I mean, because they can't. All they're doing is protecting the bottom line, right?
Yes.
When you run a company, you'll figure out a way to get along if it means making more money for your company or whatever, right? When it comes to politics, I mean, think about this. I mean, we gridlock on some of the most ridiculous things. I mean, they literally didn't do another stimulus bill before, after talking about it forever, before the election because they didn't want to give him an advantage. Now, granted, there's millions of people that needed that money, right?
Yes.
I mean, think about that. I mean, now this is what I'm talking about. It's a fucking daycare. It's like an adult daycare. I mean, it's to think that like your job, you're getting voted in by the people, and you're not protecting the interests of the people, but in essence, you're playing a childish, addictive game of roulette with the economics and the finances of the people that elect you. It's insane. It's
Yeah.
insane, right? I mean, so I mean, trying to get them to look at things from a perspective like he just described, which was a well put, like rational perspective, it doesn't happen. You know, it's nonsense. So this is why we exist where we exist right now as far as the country. But I think, like I said, I mean, I don't, you know, the optimist in me hopes that this year resembles, from a division perspective, rock bottom, right?
Correct.
With the riots and the protests and all the growing pains we went through as a country this year. The optimist in me hopes that this is rock bottom, right?
But
I don't.
if you have an ideology, Jay, it's hard to go from one ideology to another without, you know, learning facts about
For sure.
what
I mean,
your ideology is.
how could you sincerely go from one ideology to another without learning facts? You
That's
couldn't.
well, you got these far leftists in Portland and in your, your city where you grew up in Philadelphia. I mean, I didn't know Philly was that much lefty. I mean, it's crazy out there. You got New
Oh,
York City.
it's been Democrat for like the last 50 years. I mean, but look, again, it's politics in general are it's and you know, even the good people that come in and take the jobs, and they realize, like, for instance, my grandfather was in the House of Representatives, right?
Okay.
And he was in the House for a term or two back in the '60s, and he came out of there after his second term, and he told my grandmother, he goes, I'm not running again. He was like, and my grandfather was a very good man, right?
But
So
that's the
I mean,
60s. That was I mean, what year was that? Because the riots happened around that
he
time.
was it was like 60 again, maybe 65, 60, somewhere around there. He was like 26,
Oh, wow.
right? Yeah, he was young, 36, something like that. He was young though, but he came back after, and he goes, listen, I'm paraphrasing, but there's some crazy stuff that goes on there because I'm not going back. I'm not running again. And he chose not to run again. And the fact of the matter is, he chose not to run again because is insinuating there's just a lot of stuff that goes on behind closed doors, right? And everybody knows that,
Yes.
right? Everybody understands that. But I think it's probably significantly more than anybody even understands. Understand what I mean? Like, it's more profound than anybody even understands. And the interests of us, who knows if they're protected? But I think that we feel the reverberations of the stuff that goes on there. You understand what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Like, we're stuck with the drama that's there when it's not drama that we're instituting. It's not drama that we're fanning the flames of. It's not drama that we're pouring gasoline on the fire. It's drama that is completely unsubstantiated. It shouldn't happen in the first place.
Correct.
Because the purpose of government in the first place is to protect the consumer. So, I mean, when you get back to a base case like that, you hope that we get back to a point of, at the very least, that they get better at manipulating their intentions for us, right?
Yes.
At the very least, so that it looks again like they actually give a shit.
Guys, we only got about 15, 20 minutes more to go in this podcast. Whatever question you have, please let us know. We don't mind answering your question. Again, it comes from a background of finance, economics, real estate. Any question concerning that, credit, let us know. I'll answer for you. We will answer for you right now. But no, Jay, it's true. So right now, the people who are starting credit repair with us, or anyone looking into saying, "Oh, I don't know what's gonna happen now," because there's a lot of people confused. Whether you like Trump or you like Biden, it's still up in the air because that's the big confusion with the market. As you would tell me prior to the last 2 days, there's a lot of confusion and not a lot of things get done until that day, until election day comes, in which we know if it's going to lean to the right or lean to the left. So what you're saying is business as usual. You're saying it doesn't matter, just keep going at whatever thought you're thinking about. Like if you're
Yeah. So, effectively, I mean, the broader the presidential race is a macro topic, right? Meaning like a broader, like a general topic that affects things generally. So it affects policy, which affects businesses, taxation, stock market, etc. Right? And for that purpose, a lot of that stuff is not going to change. Hence, as a stock market going up, um, it made back all the losses from last week.
Correct. That's what Curtis Davis just commented.
It made it all back because it's business as usual. So none of that crazy far left concern, that stuff that you were describing earlier. Not saying it's crazy, but all that stuff that you were describing earlier from what is perceived to be the far left, that's not going to materialize with the way the dynamic is setting up right now at this time, until they get full control. Now they don't have full control right now. So like I said earlier, that's why you're seeing the Facebooks go up and the Google go up and all of them, because the regulation isn't there, right? It's not going to be there. They're not going to get hammered, and they're going to continue to do business the way they did last year, and they made record profits in the year before with Trump, and record profits. More than likely, it's going to be any changes that are going to go on in the future are going to be incremental. Now, as far as until somebody gets control again, by the way. Now, as far as a microcosm of that would be, lending within the broader economy. Now, if business stays as usual, that would be the idea, because the Fed's already said they're going to support everything. So they're going to keep rates low. They're going to provide a backdrop, which is going to be copacetic to people, still borrowing if they can. But the banks, here's the even smaller microcosm, though, is that the banks still aren't comfortable with the lending environment. You go and try and get a business loan from a business, from one of the larger banks, Chase, etc. They're still not looking at them closely. They're still pushing them away. They've made more money now. It's incredible what they've done. And I talked about this on a podcast, I think March or April, one of them, where I was saying that I don't understand why, if you're one of these companies like Capital One, or where you have a high default rate, 20%, 21%, whatever that it is for them, why you just sell off your debts like that, right? Why you take 2 cents on the dollar? Why don't you roll out an arm, right? This is what Bank of America did back in 2008. They took all their shit mortgages, right? They opened up an arm that they sold them to get it off their balance sheet. That arm then turned around and it basically did all these workouts with all these mortgages, right? Got people back to it's a totally different company, but under the arm of Bank of America. Got all these people to work out payment terms, foreclosed on the ones they had to, got the other ones back to pay through modifications. The ones that they got through modifications, after 2 years, they turned around and sold off to another mortgage buyer, so they got them off their balance sheet. They sold the properties that they had to foreclose on. They cleaned all that up. Business is gone. Back to business with Bank of America as usual. It doesn't impact Bank of America's earnings, right? It doesn't impact their earnings. Now, if you're Capital One and you have a 21 or 22% default rate, why are you selling? And that could, honestly, in all fairness, quarterly, that could be a couple $100 million worth of face value. You're selling them for 1 or 2 cents on the dollar. Why wouldn't you do the same thing and roll out a company that you send all your collections to, that you own exclusively, right? And that you just hammer people all day long, and you keep, let's just say, the average collection amount for a collection company is about 40% of the face value. So you're keeping 39% of your face value, right? 39% of the face value as opposed to 1%. Think how much that would boost earnings.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't make any sense. The point I'm telling the story for, though, is that that's what they're doing now.
Okay.
So because they're not making money on new loan origination right now, and they're not making it on new issuance of credit, what the banks are doing is they're hammering people that don't pay. They're taking them to court. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff because they're going through the loss mitigation process, and it's found money. They're realizing now that they don't have to sell them off for 1 or 2 cents on the dollar. That they can collect, they can take them to court, and shit. If you get a judgment against you, can collect 100 cents on the dollar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're getting into that area of things. So they've been cutting back this whole year on the lending, but they're making just as much money on the mitigation side, right? So the whole reason for me mentioning that is they're going to need a motivator to want to turn around and lend again. They're going to need to see clarity in the market.
Correct.
And they're going to need to see clearance. And in order to see clearance, they're going to need to see some kind of unified effort, which is what I think and I hope we get in the new year, where it's like a unified scenario, right? Some kind of organization. Without organization, there is no semblance of certainty, right? If you're Chase Bank and you're in every state of this country, the biggest bank in the United States with $3 trillion in assets, I believe, you're not going to lend in just Florida and say, you know what, Idaho's a little shady. I don't like how they're dealing. We're not going to lend there. It's a unified. You don't have the ability to turn the spigot on and off, right?
Yes.
So it's either you're back in and you're lending and you're growing with the economy, or you're slowing down. So I think that's going to be the main issue that we're going to deal with going forward on the lending side. Mortgages are different because all the mortgages in this country, 90% of them are bought by Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie Mac. Okay, that's just a fact. That's why there's no problem originating mortgages. They all get sold to the same 3 bodies, which are effectively government owned, and that's just how it works. That's why you don't ever see that stuff slow down all too greatly, right? But the fact that matters, all the other types of credit is where you're going to feel it, because that's full exposure to the bank. When a bank gives you a credit card and you don't pay that, they feel that. When they give you a loan, you don't pay that, they feel that. When you don't pay your auto loan, they'll get that car back, but they'll still feel that loss, right?
Yes.
That's direct loss that they feel. And they substantiate. So until they start getting a little more clearance, that's where the problem's going to be, I think, in the economy, even if it's business as usual.
Okay.
And the way you fix that is by getting a unified plan, which I think inevitably will probably be where we land.
Okay, so I got Kevin Clark here, who is a hard money lender. He asks, who is your guest? I don't see his name anywhere. His name is here. It's John in Florida. He's been my business partner with Credit Repair since 2012. The guy is a wealth of knowledge, as you can hear and see. Kevin Clark is a hard money lender. So in real estate, and I believe that you are also a hard money lender, Jay, what will, in that area of lending, does it change?
No, because it's not based on anything, right? I mean, for the for the lender, if you're an actual lender, like we have a fund that it comes out of our fund. Some people broker out stuff. Everybody's a little different, right?
Okay.
But we lend the money, so the money's based on the return, right? So it's effectively you're giving. It's a safer return than people that don't understand the stock market, right? It's a safer return than it's a significantly better return than going buying bonds right now, like 2%, which is nothing, right? I mean, you're basically tracking inflation at that point. It's a waste of time before tax. You can buy munis and not pay tax, but you're still tracking the same amount. So there's not a lot of vehicles right now that you can really get return outside the stock market. One of them is lending on real estate. Problem is, values are so frothy right now that it makes it very difficult, and there's not a ton of really good value plays to get into we typically don't lend on the smaller stuff. We lend on the larger stuff, um, because it just doesn't make sense to do 50 smaller loans that could take long and you got to work them out and stuff like that. It's more on the larger scale. But that being said, there's not a ton of opportunity there, but it's a good model. It's a great model, but it's not predicated on anything market related. I mean, if the area is yielding a hard money lender rate or private money rate of 8 to 12%, then that's what you're going to lend. It doesn't matter if interest rates are 6% or 2%. You know, I mean, that's what you're going to lend because it's based upon the yield spread you're getting from your investors. If you borrow from your investors at 4, you float it at 12, you make 8. You make 8% in the middle plus the points, right?
Yes.
So I mean, it's not tied to anything, right? It's tied to what the market is going to lend at, and when capital becomes a commodity like it typically is, and somebody doesn't have the ability to get anything conventional, then that's your crown jewel right there, right? So it's a means to an end, and in a lot of cases it's a bridge. But no, I don't see any situation where it would. But I mean, you're not going to expose yourself to risky because look, it's commiserate with the risk, right? Most of the people trying to get private money are doing it for either the fact they can't substantiate income, maybe their credit's a little hairy, but they got a great deal, right? Well, I mean, a great deal meaning that what it's worth versus what they're buying it for, or if there's repairs, et cetera, that got to go into it. So, I mean, you're building it into the risk. Some people get a little piggish with it, but at the fact of the matter is, I mean, that's exactly what banking
This
is.
guy?
When the risk gets a little heavier, you raise the interest rate on it, in an effort to offset that risk, so that if things go left or right, it can cover you a little bit.
Okay. All right. So Curtis Davis says, I think we were talking about the small SBA loan. He said Powell said the minimum loan 1 million easy for them to help this size of loan. Powell wants to help small businesses, just hard. It's just hard, he says. Powell.
Yeah, he wants to help small businesses, but you got to understand something. Small businesses is categorized as anybody with 500 employees or less,
Okay.
right? So there's a big difference between the guy that sells bicycles and has just one employee, right, and a pharmaceutical company that does 28 billion in revenue and has 495 employees, right? There's a
Yes.
significant difference there, right? He's not talking about the bike shop owner. He's talking about the guy that's 498 and has a significant amount of debt and investors that are help carrying that company, and they're trying to figure out ways to keep pumping money into them, right? Um, and yeah, he's doing everything to accommodate everything possible that he can possibly do within the statute of the Fed. He's doing so. I don't think anybody's faulting him. Um, he just has limitation, and if he wanted to get his limitations expanded, Congress would have to step in, and that's why he was pleading with Congress, going, for the last 3 months, like push the stimulus for it, push the. If you ever heard him talk, he was effectively pleading with them. Like, look, you need to do it. The economy needs it badly. Please do it. Please do it. I mean, he was doing everything short of that,
Yes.
and still nothing. So it goes back to my point earlier, right? Just about the fact that, um, I mean, it's unfortunate, right? And you just hope that at the end of the day, the stimulus, and I think more than likely it's going to get pushed through the early part of next year. It gets pushed through the early part of next year. People start getting the money that they need. You just hope they can hold over through the holidays, right? I mean,
Correct.
for some of these businesses, it would have been the most appropriate time to usher this in sometime in October, which could have carried them through the next year, right? And next year, hopefully, you're talking vaccine, maybe some more implementation as far as measures are concerned that could have helped provide some solace for people and ultimately giving them peace of mind. But this is where we're at. So.
Okay, so we got Ernest Dobson who says the greatest duo the game has ever seen. Facts. Good evening, fellas.
Thanks,
Shout
man.
out to Ernest Dobson. I think Ernest, this is him right here. We were able to help him get a new vehicle, a Monte Carlo. See, I did the Nightmare on Elm Street thumbnail, Nightmare at the car dealership, because he he got financing prior to going to the dealership, and that's how you're supposed to do it. And he's an educated car buyer. When you get the financing first, then you go into the dealership. But he still got suckered in there to let his credit be ran, and they ran his credit 12 times. Anyways, the bank that we originally sent him to gave him the best rate anyway. So all those 12 inquiries, and they still couldn't beat the rate that the bank gave him. It doesn't matter. He got his ride. Good for
And
you,
that's all.
Ernest.
Listen, at the end of the day, all is well that ends well. He got what he needed, and it was just at the right time, and everything worked out exactly how it should. So, I mean, and he and I communicated about the fact that that it was um, I mean, they look. It ends up as much as it pains me when I hear the story that he went and did it anyway, even though we got him approved and they couldn't beat the rate. It happens. You just hope that they mitigate the damage. You understand what I mean? Like, there's not
Yes.
that many inquiries that are accrued because sometimes these guys are the dealerships. They're just animals. You know what I mean? Just
Correct.
animals. They just have absolutely no conscience. They just rip people through. And if you're somebody like Ernest who had like 700 credit, you shouldn't be shopping at the 12 place. You shouldn't have to do that. And we already talked about why they do it to build in the yield spread, so on and so
Correct.
forth. I get it, but I mean, if you're on your game and you know how to do that, at least if you know how to hustle people at the very least, you should know which lenders are going to float you the lowest rate so that you can build in a quality yield spread. You should be shopping at the 20 different places. So it's just indicative of somebody not being good at their craft in the first place, right? So it lends to more frustration the more I talk about it.
Correct.
Um, you know,
Cooley said, so what new administration? It could be either or. The Trump administration, the Biden administration.
It really doesn't matter. It really
If
doesn't matter at this point who wins. It's gonna be split. Nothing's really gonna happen. If Trump wins, his business as usual. Biden wins, his business as usual, because they're split. The House and the Senate are split. So effectively, any measures that need to be made have to be agreed on. And as has been evidenced by the fact that we're unable to even come to an agreement on a stimulus package when our country desperately needed it, the chances of them passing anything significant is almost zero. So I think the one thing that they're going to be forced to have to agree on after the election will be the stimulus, and that will be probably the whoever is president. That will probably be the biggest thing of next year that they push through, and I think from that point on, it's going to be figuring out a way to pay back the debt.
okay. And Curtis Davis says, any thoughts on marijuana stock IIRPR New Jersey?
No, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't seen it. I do think that
Or is it LLPR? No, it's capital letter.
no,
Better
no,
to lease.
yeah, but here's the thing though. When it comes to the pot stocks, I follow some of the bigger ones, but the problem that they have right now is that although everybody is in desperate need of their product, they're terrible at running their business, right?
Hmm.
They haven't figured out yet after 4 or 5 years, and almost every one of their earnings calls, like from a monetary perspective, are terrible. And the gaps don't tighten that much, which is why you see Canopy, which is one of the largers, they've been hovering down here at 20 bucks, 15, 16, 17, 20 bucks a share, despite making more and more money, because they haven't figured out a way to do it efficiently yet. And that's the problem, right? Yes, more and more more and more states are adopting it. There's definitely a large opportunity, but until they figure out how to put their shoes on, that you can make all the money in the world. If you don't know how to balance a budget, right, and you're not making the earnings that people expected on the course of time that you should be doing it, it becomes problematic. So I like them. I don't like them as much as I like the gambling stocks, because gambling is a very binary art, right? So if you take a company like DraftKings that has an already proven successful business model of people that come in and just do the fancy stuff and pay for it, but then you add the gambling element into it, the ability to gamble. I mean, you're putting gasoline on a fire at that point, right? And it just dropped like 50% over the last. It literally dropped 50% into the beginning of this week. So I mean, it's an ideal time to buy it over the course of time. Not that I'm telling anybody they should. I already own it, and I'm not telling anybody they should buy it. I'm just saying that I like that model better because of the fact that it has the same amount of expansion, it has the same amount of growth, and significantly less variable. Right? The variables are limited down to strictly sports. Right? I mean, sports
Yes.
aren't going anywhere. So yeah, there may be less games to bet on if it's Corona, but that's a nominal. It's a very nominal scenario, and it's short lived. I mean, the house wins when it comes to gambling all the time. I mean, it's not a question. It's why they're always typically so successful. So, I mean, when you couple that with everything else, I just think gambling has a shorter path to success. I do think over the course of time, though, pot stocks, if you have the ability to wait a little bit, and I'm talking Ernest, I mean,
Curtis. Curtis.
Curtis, sorry. Curtis, I mean, I didn't even look at that stock, so I don't know it specifically. I'm talking more on the larger ones, like Canopy and stuff, but I do think long term they're going to be huge. I mean, there's a reason. Um, it's escaping me right now. The one company I forget, it's the alcohol company, and it's escaping me. I got like a brain fart right now.
In
STZ,
Colorado?
STZ is the stock symbol.
Okay.
They pumped like an insane amount of money. They bought an insane amount of canopy, like ownership in Canopy, right? They did it because they know that's where the future is, and they're starting to merge pot into um, alcoholic beverages, right? Because they know that's where the future is. There's a drink out now where it's like a pot infused beer, right? So it's like, you know, you're gonna slowly start to see that stuff merge together, and then subsequently it's growing. So yeah, man. I mean, I like the model. I think it runs parallel with gambling, but I just think gambling's a shorter path to a high number until the growers and everybody in that long daisy chain can get their act together to start bringing it back to bottom line earnings. You know what I mean?
Okay, Jay. One last question, my friends. We gotta go. We got kids here. You already know. Okay, Curtis asked, better to lease car through a business or buy car for the business?
Okay, I love
Ally.
this question. I'm glad it was at the end of the question because I'm glad he asked this question.
He's Ally Financial or for financing. Better to lease a car business or buy car for business.
Okay, well, I'm glad he asked this question. Good question, Curtis. So here's the myth. Okay, the myth is that everybody should lease a car through your name of your business, and you lease, you get to write off the full amount, okay,
Correct.
of the lease, assuming you use it for business, right? That's true. That's absolutely true. But here's the reality: if you use your car for business, okay, and you buy the car, you get to depreciate the asset, you get to write off the interest, okay, which effectively in a certain part of the payment, you get to write off your miles, a certain part of the miles. When you lease a car, you're capped in what you can write off to just that. When you own the car, you get all these different variables that you get to write down over and above that. And I don't think people understand that. Depreciation is a kicker, right? That's not even that's just wear and tear in your car. It's like an invisible number that they attach to it. Most cars, it's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 grand in depreciation that you get every year that you get to write down if it's a business related car on top of the interest. So for instance, let's just say you have a $50,000 car and you're paying 5% interest. That's an additional, what's that? You're paying 20, you get an additional $2,500 write off, right? Plus, let's say you get the depreciation, plus you get to do a certain amount of miles that you get to write down on it too. So it ends up being close to, just using that example, you're talking 12, 14, let's just say 15 grand spread over 12 months. It's almost a $1,500 payment that comes back to you, but you're only paying out on a $50,000 loan like $800. You're effectively getting more back that you're paying in. When you have a lease, you only get the amount that you paid for the lease. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Did you follow me? I said it really quick so I can walk it back, but did you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I hope Curtis understands.
But the point I'm trying to make is it makes so much more sense. Number one, it's an asset, and it's an asset that goes on the balance sheet of your business, right? When you
Yes.
lease a car, you're effectively renting it from the manufacturer. That's what it is.
Correct.
It's a rental. Okay, you're just renting it for a long period of time. When you own it, obviously that's not the case. You get to put it as an asset on your balance sheet, which can be used for any number of things. You build equity into it. But on top of that, you also get to depreciate. You also get to write off all the interest. You also get to do all these other variables I explained earlier, and it ends up being significantly more of a write-off than just the lease by itself. So hopefully that answered your question.
So it doesn't matter if it's a new car or a 3-year-old car.
It affects the depreciation that you're entitled to. If it's a new car, you get a larger depreciation amount, but you still get the same write-offs, right?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. You got that? Thanks, he said. He said also, yeah, Canopy growth, but Scott Miracle grow making a play too, he said.
Yeah, no, there's going to be a lot of people. You're going to see a lot of people. This is part of the problem. They've had a 4 or 5 year head start, right? A lot of these big companies, and they literally haven't figured out how to make, with the amount of revenue they bring in and the amount of share of the market that they've had over this period of time, they haven't figured out the proper way in the quickest amount of time to be able to show the right amount of money that they're making, to show their increment. And that's where the problem is. That's why you see the stock down where it's at. I'm speaking specifically about Canopy right now, but most of the big players,
Yeah.
are the stocks are low, and it's because of that. So you're going to see other people get into the business because it hasn't been a cornered market yet. There is no Coca-Cola. There is no
Yeah,
Nike.
it's true.
And when and if the idea is that all you need is a connection of growers, like if you do your research on these guys, like a lot of them, like their problem that they're having is in their daisy chain from their growers to their the houses where they separate it to getting it to the retail and this. It's ridiculous. It's a long line that should be much more logistical. They should take a lesson from FedEx, and in order to do that, it'll probably enable them to be significantly more efficient and allow that to translate down. They just don't. And it's run literally like, it's not run the way it should for how large it is. And unfortunately, because of that, you're seeing other people get into the market, and they got a legitimate possibility of entering the market and being successful in the market because nobody's mastered the market yet. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true. Alrighty, Jay. We're coming up on an hour 41 minutes. We wanted to be around that much because we got to put our kids to bed around 7 o'clock here in the East Coast. Thank you so much to John. Let me see. Anything else you want to say, John, before any type of I don't know, word of encouragement, whether it's Biden or Trump?
I think the word of encouragement, like I said before, I mean, unfortunately, my hope is that we become closer together
That's true.
as a country, right? That's my hope. But I mean, the word of encouragement is that that people should take from this is that all these things that you watched on Facebook, you read on Facebook, you read on YouTube, you read on Instagram about these far extreme programs that are being brought in. If in fact Biden does happen to take, it's not going to happen with a split House and a split Senate, right? With them not being without that full blue wave, it's not going to happen. It can't happen. There's checks and balances, and that's the exact term for it in our government. In order for those big programs to push through, they got to agree at the House. There has to be a majority. There has to be a majority at the Senate. And given the fact that one of them is Republican, majority is Republican, the other one's Democrat, it's gridlock. And none of that stuff, like we talked about earlier, the one's not going to help the other one. It's just how it is. And all those big things that they don't support aren't going to push through. So we will stay. It'll be status quo. Status quo being business as usual, being a good thing, right? Now, if we can just get the coronavirus thing underway and get that under wraps, then we can start to push back to January 2020 as far as where we were at as an economy. And I think that's where the focus point should be. If business is as usual on a macro level, and the largest issue we have on a from a micro perspective is the virus. That's what needs to be administered. But I think adhered to or fixed or rectified, etc. I think once that happens, then we can start to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Okay. All righty, Jay. Thank you so much. Well, hopefully we'll do this again in another 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we will.
I mean, I'm the baby slept 4 hours in this afternoon, so he's sleeping more. So I'm only getting about 3 hours sleep on a nightly basis because the baby's
Listen, we'll work them in when we can, man. I mean, it's just that's all we can do. So I mean, you just got a kid, and I got young kids too. So we'll do our best to try and work it in as much as we can, and inform the best we can as much as we can.
All righty, my people. Listen, we're still alive, we're still here, and we still want to be here educating you. Everyone say thank you to John. Thank you, John. All right, Jay. So I'm gonna see you.
Right,
Take care.
all right,
Yep. All right, that was John trying to put some normalcy into your guys' heads because I wanted to talk about the change in administration. Many of you are Republican, many of you are a Democrat, many of you are a centrist, and that's the thing about credit is that everyone needs it. It doesn't matter if if you far right, far left, in the middle, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Communist. I mean, look, we help out everybody. Okay, so that's why we like to have these podcasts. Not only is it for you guys to have a better understanding of how real estate, credit, financing, economics work, for you to be better educated at how you're gonna go out there and live your life. So definitely, thank you so much for tuning in. How you like how you guys like the thumbnail? Everybody's like, I didn't know you were going for president, G. I'm gonna go for president as a libertarian. Liberty for all. Anyways, mi gente, listen, I want to talk to you guys about our $99 do-it-yourself credit repair system for Credit Life. This system, teaches you how to fix your own credit. You see right over here, it says 1 out of 32 pages. Basically, it gives you 5 rounds of disputes so you guys could, do it yourself. It only costs $99. Now, if you guys are looking for a credit repair quote, you already know my email below. You see, GizzyCredit at GizzyCredit.com is the email that you guys to use. Many of you text me though, and I appreciate you guys texting. But with the baby and everything, I'm still running around trying to text you guys back to your email addresses so that I can send you my full info on how to start credit repair. But no, all is well. Thank you so much for logging on. I got some coffee here. Thank you so much. You know, I need the coffee. So if you guys could donate at the Cash App, definitely appreciate you. Anyways, mi gente, I hope you are well. And leave you guys off with the hashtag GizzyCredit team song, GizzyCredit song. Thank you so much. What's up, Andrew? Al, see ya later. Take care, guys.
GizzyCredit. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scammed, cause then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. Look pathetic. Gizzy, Gizzy, Gizzy. GizzyCredit. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't get scammed, cause then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look pathetic. Look pathetic. Gizzy, 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 GizzyCredit. Don't get scammed. What you need is just a change of plans. When time is money, you know, get that cash. Whatever form it comes, just